Hey everybody. It finally happened. I had a TPK in session 1 on my Thursday night group. This happened roughly a month ago, and so we're going to talk about TPKs, why they should be a thing, what you can learn from them, and how to handle them. So, first off, what do we mean by TPK? The term stands for Total Party Kill. You might have also heard Total Party Wipe, Total Party Knockout. Be that as it may, means the same thing. Everybody, all the players, have hit 0 HP. The adventure is considered a failure in the highest degree. Now they are all skeletons in the dungeon, or in the cave, or in the castle, wherever they happen to be. So, I know I can probably speak for a lot of referees when I say I don't like when this happens. It's a consequence of our games. It is something that would happen in the real world if fantasy was indeed a real world setting. People would go in, and a lot of times the little group of coworkers would perish in the structure. So, I don't like when it happens. I think a lot of referees do not like when it happens. As we don't like the idea of failure. I personally love seeing my players and their characters succeed. Be that as it may, I'm running a game, and I'm the referee. My job is to be fair and impartial, and so I must keep the game going in that direction. Now let me prologue what I'm getting ready to go into. I've never had a single player quit my games because of the way I ran my games. I got my youngster here. So, anyways. Yeah, but, anyways. So, my job is to be fair and impartial. I control creatures that, depending on the reaction roll, may want these characters dead or consider them a threat to their home. So, they're going to try to push the party out, either force them to flee or pay with their lives. In the case of bandits, they would definitely, your money or your life is not an empty threat. So, the reason why TPKs should be a thing in your games is because in order to have success that means anything, you must also have failure. When failure is an absence, the success means nothing. I have heard, you go on YouTube, you look at any first time dungeon master, game master, referee video, and many of them will say some kind of combination of don't TPK your party, don't make sure their deaths mean something narratively, and fudge the dice rolls if you have to. In the same videos, they'll say that they hate railroads. And I can think of nothing more railroady than that. Taking away the chance of failure, making sure the characters stay on the track of success, because that's the story you want to tell. So, the reason that TPKs exist is because it's probably the most tangible evidence of absolute failure for player characters. And so, because it's death. You are no bigger loser than when your HP hits 0. It happens. It's a consequence of the game. There's a chance it can happen. And so, it's one of the reasons why I implore you, do not take TPKs out of your games. Keep them in there. There's a reason they're there. They are a symbol because they're the other side of the coin of absolute success. They are the absolute failure. Also consider them a tool. So, what can be learned from TPKs? Now, normally, this is something that more has to do with players. So, what my players learned in that particular group is they went back to the dungeon. They had a totally different environment. They had the same environment, but a totally different encounter than the one that killed them. And so they escaped because this was actually honestly more deadly than what killed them before. And so they spent the next 2 weeks creating spiked barriers. these berries with punji spikes on the other end, and I ruled how much wood it would take, how long it would take, this, that, and everything else. They set them up in the dungeons, so now they've got them in the dungeons because the first room they're in, the stairs are in the north, and there's openings to the south, east, and west, so they could be surrounded conceivably. So that's what they took away. Is it metagamey? A tad bit, but considering their characters ran into something extremely dangerous and lived to tell the tale, I don't think it's out of the ordinary. I wouldn't consider that metagaming, and that's a subject I plan on making a video on in the future, because apparently every channel that deals with TTRPGs talks about metagaming. So, what can you as a referee learn from TPKs? Well, to tell you the truth, not much. You did your job, maybe a little too well, but be that as it may, it must be something that you are prepared to do. TPKs for the Dungeon Master don't mean a whole lot of things, except for the fact that it proves that you're willing to take Old Yeller behind the barn and put a bullet in it, so to speak. So, what really all you can learn, though, is how to handle it when it happens. Now, I personally have a house rule in my game, where you roll your first character, you roll 3d6, straight down the line. What you get is what you get. Strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. 3d6 straight down the line. But if your first character dies, not retires, but dies, and you make a second character, then you can you still roll 3d6, but you can allot those stats to wherever. So, it kind of deadens the blow a bit. I watched a video one time in which one guy said that his first encounter they got into, they were killed by bugbears, and they had a mulligan. They decided to, redo the scenario. How do you approach this differently now that you know that basic fantasy is as lethal as it is? So, I don't have a problem with that, especially if it's a level 1 party with first encounter. I've also heard of people doing mulligans for every TPK. Just mulligan the whole encounter all over. If somebody comes out on the other end dead, but the rest of the party is still alive, and that other person is still dead, I'm not a huge fan of that, necessarily, but I can see that working, I suppose, if you make sure that you make that clear from the outset. I can see that working, and if your players are cool with it, far be it for me to tell you how to rule death, but death must still be an option. So I guess in short, because I'm trying to make these videos short, because I seem to have a drop off at about 10-minute mark on a lot of these things, and I make 20 plus minute videos most of the time. But anyways, to get to my point, I guess whenever at the end of the day, a TPK should be something in the referee's toolbox. It is something that exists. It is something that would have a real life basis. We know from history of armies being wiped out, and considering these games had a root in the wargaming community with chainmail, for example, we know that this is kind of a holdover from that, but it would realistically happen. After all, what is a party but a small band of individuals that broke off from an army, right? So that's kind of what the concept comes from. So, for first-time players that are playing this game, if you get in TPK, don't worry, it's not a big deal. It happens. Your character is more likely going to die. You should make peace with that. That should always be a consequence. And for first-time game masters, do not be afraid of the possibility this happens. This is simply a consequence of the game. Now, I want to also talk about the idea of game balance. I don't balance my games personally. Whatever the dice rolls give me, that's what I use. But I see the reason for game balance if you decide that that works for your table. But keep in mind that it is a situation in which the victory is earned, and it's not just given to the players. After all, if you give a party of 6, 1 or 2 goblins, that's not really a victory at that point. So, however, a goblin party of 6 versus 6 party members stands a better chance of actually wiping out that whole entire party, and so the victory would be earned. So I would implore you, if you are going to balance your games like that, keep that in mind. I suppose if you have a session in which, let's say my party kept going back to this dungeon and kept dying and dying and dying over and over again, TPKing. What would have I done then? I probably would have picked something else to run. I would have picked another dungeon or stuck them in another part of the world. Excuse me. We can come back to this later. It'll come in the future. But if it seems obviously too hard, then don't be afraid to run something else. Because obviously, if people are sitting at the table and dying over and over and over again, that's really no fun at that point. You know, it's one thing to have it happen once, maybe twice, but after third, fourth, fifth time, it's probably time to run something else for the night. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm going to end this video now. So don't be afraid of the consequences of this. It's something that happens. Remind your players that hacking and slashing your way to victory is not always the answer. Personally, I give XP out for different things besides just combat and slaying monsters. If I consider the encounter a success, however I define it, they get experience for it. So, as always guys, take care, God bless, see you on the other side.